Hi guys, this is Emma and today I'm going to be taking a look at Twin Peaks episode 12 on a scene-by-scene basis, so I'm just going to watch the episode and talk my way through it. This isn't going to be a watch-along video because I'm going to edit what I'm going to say, so that will be a shorter video just to get some more clarity on the episode, I think, because of the fact that it was a bit of a strange one. It seemed to divide opinion amongst fans. Lots of people hated it, lots of people loved it, lots of people suggesting to me that there were elements at play that perhaps we missed. I don't necessarily believe that if we understand more about, for example, the thematic elements of a piece, that the piece becomes more enjoyable. I do think that as a standalone episode, this was like nothing I've ever seen before. To me, it fits more into the idea of the 18-hour movie, this episode, and I think that it would make more sense as a whole, you know, with the other 17 episodes. I think this episode would be difficult to rewatch as a singular episode, and a lot of people seem to be upset about the Audrey scene, but I did go back to that scene and watch it again, and I think perhaps after the initial shock of finding out where Audrey is and what her life has become has worn off, then that scene kind of plays out differently. So I'm going to have a look at the whole episode. Okay, so we start off with Gordon, Cole, Tammy and Albert. We've seen a lot of this group now and I'm really liking their interactions. I think that they are like the Scooby-Doo gang, you know, they really are a great team. Diane has obviously been included in that group, but I think that this little triangle of Albert, Tammy and Gordon is a great one, and the characters play off each other. I think we've learned a lot about Gordon Cole's history with Albert and Diane, and Albert and Diane's history as well. So when they raise their glasses and toast to the bureau, you get the sense that they really are married to their work and that this is who they are. It's part of their personality that they are an FBI agent. Cooper was exactly the same. Him being an FBI agent was integral to his character. Okay, so Albert schools Tammy on the history of Project Blue Book and the Blue Rose cases. Some interesting information here. I didn't actually realize that Jeffries was head of the Blue Rose cases and that it was Jeffries that recruited Chet and Albert and Dale as well. So it's interesting that Albert explains that Gordon has been reluctant to bring anybody in until tonight. So does that mean that all this time there hasn't been anyone else involved in investigating the Blue Rose cases? It doesn't seem so. And why is Tammy the perfect candidate? They might have tested certain agents like Sam Stanley to see if they were made of the right stuff, and perhaps they weren't. Perhaps Tammy has passed all of Gordon Cole's tests. Perhaps she just has the aptitude for this kind of work. But I just think it's interesting that Gordon, I mean, he explains the risks basically to Tammy and she responds with excitement, I think, about being involved in the team. It's interesting that she doesn't seem to hesitate before saying she's in. I think that says a great deal about how eager she is to be involved in these cases and the fact that she's a right fit for the Blue Rose team. The dangers of being involved in the Blue Rose cases are clearly spelled out to Tammy in this scene, and she accepts the proposal even though she knows that her life can be in danger. I find it interesting that they are in this room of red curtains, just like the Black Lodge, and that Diane makes this dramatic entrance through the curtain, rather like the man from Another Place, the little man. Her dress style is almost futuristic, right? And it's interesting how Diane, as she's pouring her drink, making the drink for herself, that everybody looks at her the same as the audience are looking at her, wondering if she can be trusted, wondering if she's playing the other side. I'm curious that she asked what was in it for her, because I thought that her motivation in being here was to help Cooper. That's to say, I'm thinking of Diane as the good Diane. If she was the bad Diane, then that question becomes more valid and something that she would probably reasonably say. So very interesting that we see Diane do this strange movement with her fingers, kind of like a gun. Also a bit like the signals that we see Laura Palmer effect in the Black Lodge, in the Red Room, and also the little man. And we hear the sound of the score from Fire Walk With Me, the same music that was played before we see the car windscreen with Let's Rock written on it. The fact that Diane says Let's Rock suggests that she might know a little bit more about either Chet Desmond's situation, or she might know a bit more about what goes on in the lodge. It's difficult because I think that everything Diane says right now is to leave us wondering whether she's good or bad, so you could interpret it both ways right now, I think, until we find out for certain what her deal is. Okay, so the next scene is Jerry running out of the woods. He has been stuck there for a few episodes with his foot talking to him, and he has seemingly been hallucinating things, but now he's running away from the woods. He seems to be out of the woods, possibly making his way back to the town. I've heard people say that there may be blood on his hands, but it looks like fingerless red gloves to me. He appears to be in control of his foot, and he still looks shocked, as if something terrible has happened to him. So the next scene is Sarah in the supermarket. Grace Zabriskie is a really talented actress, and I think she's compelling in all of her scenes in this episode. So thinking about what might have happened to characters from the original show, where Sarah Palmer is right now is kind of where I would have expected her to be. I think that what she went through, and also the things that she was going through personally, seemed like she was a conduit for spiritual beings to use her. She was having psychic visions, and I think that all of the things combined, what happened with her family and what happened to herself, I think that it's logical that she would turn to the booze, and it's logical that she would perhaps be having some mental health problems. But I also think that what happens to her in this scene is probably more than that. I think that she is channeling something. So lots of people have mentioned the fact that Sarah Palmer talks about the turkey jerky, and of course turkey ties in with what Laura was saying in Fire Walk With Me, and comparing herself to a turkey in the corn, leading back to the Garmin Bozier. I also think that she looks pretty disgusted when she looks up at the packets of meat, and I perhaps think that she's thinking that the world has a brutal nature. She may be thinking back to that wildlife video that we saw her watching early on in the series. She's also pointing out that things are different to how she thought they were, and that she believes that things have changed, which suggests that there may have been a change in the town itself of Twin Peaks. It could be just a broader way of saying that something has happened to Twin Peaks that has gone unnoticed almost. She didn't notice that the turkey jerky had appeared. It was just there one day, a bit like all of the violent acts and behaviors that we're seeing in Twin Peaks. I think that perhaps they're coming more into the consciousness of the townsfolk now, coming to the awareness of the police force as well. What Sarah says is quite interesting. She starts out by saying, "Were you here when they came?" And I don't think she's talking about the packets of meat. I think she's talking about something else. I think she might be talking about Woodsman. She may be talking about Evil Coop and his gang. She may be talking about Red and his gang. Then she says the room seems different. Is she talking about the Red Room? We know that the little man has changed to the arm. Could there have been other changes in that Red Room? More mutations, if you like? And she also says that men are coming, so that we know that there is more people on the way to Twin Peaks. She might mean Gordon and his team, or she might mean Evil Coop. So Sarah is clearly in warning mode here. She wants to tell these young people that they are in danger of some sort. And when she says things can happen, I think she means like what happened to Laura. At the end of that interaction that she has with the stores people, she goes into disassociation with herself, like as if somebody else is telling her what to do. So she says, "Sarah, stop doing this. Sarah, find the car keys." I guess that this could just be her mind partitioning itself to try and stop the rot from happening to the entire ego, to the entire intellect. But it also could be something like she has a inhabiting spirit who perhaps is helping her, trying to protect her by saying, "Get out of here, this is madness. Alternatively, she may be inhabited by a evil spirit who just doesn't want to be discovered and so is trying to hide Sarah's behaviour from the populace of Twin Peaks. Okay, so we're at the Fat Trout trailer parker with Carl Rodd again. Nothing much changes. He still has that sign saying don't wake me up before sort of 9:30. It makes Carl Rodd seem like a really lovely guy, someone who really cares for the communities. I mean, Carl Rodd doesn't look like he lives well himself. He looks like perhaps he sacrifices his own good for the need of others, and I think that makes him a hero of Twin Peaks. He talks to this guy about selling his blood, which is a horrible thing to think about actually, and I think perhaps this talk about the blood donation links back to the Sarah Palmer scene in a way, with her looking at the meat. It's almost a statement about the frailty of flesh, what happens to our bodies as we continue to live and try and survive on planet Earth. And I also think that it could link in a little bit with the idea of parasitic entities being in your body, because that itself is a disgusting notion really, that something could inhabit your body and claim a part of it. Okay, so next we get this 2-second snippet of Good Coop. He's at home, but he's still wearing his suit to play ball with with Dougie's son. That's interesting because at this stage I have taken to calling Good Coop Dougie, because that's who he is really. He is acting the part of Dougie. He has become Dougie. He is no longer really Good Coop, even though Good Coop is still inside him. There appears to be no progression from the last episode in terms of Agent Cooper's awakening. A few people have mentioned that the theme of absent fathers comes into play a lot in this episode, and that scene actually reminds me of a music video the song is called Papa Ute. It's a French song. It's about a boy who didn't have a father growing up, and basically the father throughout the whole music video is like a mannequin. Have a look at that if you're interested in seeing Dougie-esque scenes play out. So interesting that Hawk turns up at Sarah Palmer's house. They seem to know each other quite well. So Sarah seems pretty angry and bitter in this scene. She says that something is in her kitchen, and from her attitude it's something that she doesn't really want to be in the kitchen. I suggested that it could have been the boy from the grocery store, it could have been Laura back from the dead. Looking back on this scene, it doesn't seem like Sarah is very happy about whatever is in her kitchen, so I think the theories about it being someone like Evil Coop or Red, or a disgruntled evil entity of some sort, are more valid than perhaps it being Laura. So we have a very brief shot of Miriam in the hospital. I also think that it's important that people like Miriam are still around in town because of the fact that Miriam seemed like such a good person. It gives us something to hope for, that she might be okay, that she might fully recover from the attack by Richard. So this is an interesting scene with Frank and Ben. Frank is telling Ben that Richard has knocked over the boy and also attacked Miriam. I can't help but wonder why Frank is telling Ben this instead of going straight to Audrey, unless Ben was Richard's guardian throughout his life, or unless Audrey is in some kind of hiding situation. Perhaps that might make sense, because in Audrey's scene she does say that she needs protection from her husband, suggesting that something has happened to her that has made her a victim, or has put her in a situation where she might be in danger from other people or from Richard himself. So the fact that Ben asks about Harry and also offers to give him this room key as a memento is interesting, because I don't think that Ben was really friends with Harry back in the day, was he? I think they must have become closer over the years, and perhaps as Ben mellowed and became a different kind of man, he was more likely to be an ally of Harry's once he changed his ways. And I think we learned a bit about that in The Secret History of Twin Peaks, because it said that Ben changed after Audrey's accident. Very interesting that Harry remains at the forefront of the conversation. It's almost like Harry has never gone away, really. He's still in this scene, even though someone else is carrying on his work. Everybody is still thinking about him and loving him. That goes for the characters and us as viewers as well. And I think that there is an unspoken notion that Harry may not recover from his illness as well, and that this may be a final act of kindness. And also that this time that Harry had with Cooper must have been so important to him and must have remained meaningful for a long time after Cooper disappeared. Okay, so Ben talks to Beverly in a tender moment, which reminds me a little bit of how Ben and Jerry became nostalgic about their childhood babysitter in the original series. Ben talks about a bike that he was very fond of, talks about his humble beginnings, I think, and brings into mind the notion that money really isn't everything, and the deeds that we do for one another are important. The way that we show our love to one another is what's important. People being there for one another, a father being there for his son. And I think it also introduces ideas about age and youth, and reminiscing about the time that you were young enough to be able to be physically active. Beverly starts to cry. Perhaps she's thinking about her husband, about his impending death, it seems. Perhaps she's thinking about the boy that was lost, the boy that Richard killed, and about the fact that he'll never have a childhood. Perhaps she loves Ben and is simply realizing it in this moment. I mean, Ben does emphasize pretty clearly at the end of that scene that he loved the bike that his father gave to him. He says that quite emphatically. And that follows the comment about Richard never having had a father. So next we have the scene with the French woman and Gordon Cole, and I have heard a lot of fans criticizing this scene, saying it went on too long. I actually like it because I just think this actress is hilarious. The whole scene is very French. It's very much like a mime in a way. She emphasizes everything, and I think that, you know, on my first viewing, I thought that she was doing it to emphasize her sexuality, to emphasize that she is such a beautiful woman. Everything about her seems perfect. She has the perfect hair, the perfect dress, perfect jewelry, perfect makeup that looks like a Chanel lipstick. She does some very strange body poses, which has led to some fans suggesting that she might be giving a coded message. When Gordon Cole brought Lil in to do a coded message for Chet and Sam, that was quite open and overt. He was upfront about the fact that this was something that had to be interpreted by the agents, and yet he doesn't say anything to Albert here in regards to that. So I'm not quite convinced that what she does is part of a coded message. So Gordon Cole tells a joke that didn't translate into French, and he also tells Albert that there are 6,000 languages in the world today. Perhaps this refers to the idea that everything we saw the woman do actually translates. Her body language translates. Then we see Gordon Cole telling Albert that he worries about him, and in this moment I have to say I kind of saw the actors. I think that this might be because of Miguel Ferrer, him not being around anymore, and the idea that when he was shooting this, they probably were aware that he was ill. And I just think that this moment cuts through the fiction. It makes me see Miguel Ferrer, it makes me see David Lynch worrying about Miguel. But I also think it probably has relevance to the story and where the story is going, because I do still get the sense that Albert is not going to survive the series. I mean, both these characters look extremely worried in this scene, almost as if they're feeling something is going to happen, something bad. Okay, so we have a scene with Chantal and Hutch. These guys are so I mean, they are just like really good at playing these low-class characters. They both look really grimy. The food that they choose to eat, the clothes that they choose to wear, they just look like they have no class, no education, no self-respect. So they have no emotional response to seeing the young boy running out in this scene. It's just like nothing to them. It's almost like they have not got a conscience. I think that's probably why Evil Coop found and recruited them. Okay, so next we have Dr. Jacoby doing his podcast again. So apparently these scenes are repeated from an earlier episode. Looks like Nadine has possibly found an outlet for her own energy. Nadine seems very calm and collected when she's watching Dr. Jacoby. I think that she may have had some kind of relationship with him in the past 25 years. She certainly seems very enamored by him, almost as if she's worshipping a celebrity. So this is a very odd entrance to the Audrey scene. The camera slides over. When I first saw this scene, I thought that this was at the Great Northern because of the fact that we have these wood panelled walls and everything. The decor looks very Twin Peaksian. The fact that there are so many books around is very interesting. They all look like old books, as if the person who has collected this has an interest in antique books. I did think that this guy, Charlie, was a writer when I first saw this scene. And it would make sense that he has so many books, and they look like newspapers on the mantle behind Audrey. He also has a stack of paper on his desk, and what look like inkwells, but they are actually paperweights. He is drowning in paperwork, and he has this old-fashioned telephone as well, which is kind of odd. And some of the things on the desk are kind of odd because he has this crystal ball, which is interesting because Audrey says at one point, let's look in your crystal ball, and he says, I haven't got a crystal ball. Well, the crystal ball is right in front of him, and his telephone is like something from the 1980s. It's actually a working telephone. It's almost as if he wants to be romantic enough to have a telephone like that, and that kind of is like how I'd imagine some writers to be, the soul of a poet sort of thing. But I see no typewriter or computer or anything like that, so I'm not quite sure about that, but I doubt very much he would write novels by hand, for instance. He certainly seems to be surrounded by things that are old-fashioned or antiquated, so it's a very difficult scene to interpret this, and I think that when I watched the scene again, I came up with some new ideas about Audrey and what's going on here. Certainly Audrey is dressed quite well for a start. She looks pretty good. She doesn't look like someone who is poor, for example. She looks like she still has money. She also looks pretty glamorous, and as if she takes care of herself. She doesn't seem to be affected by the bomb blast in any way, but at the same time she doesn't move around the room, so she could still have some kind of leg injury that we don't know about. She has a very stiff posture in this scene, and I think that's because of the anger she has towards Charlie. She holds her hands in a very tense manner, obviously very frustrated by Charlie's responses to her, and obviously very frustrated by what's happening with Billy. She says that she had a dream of Billy, which is quite interesting because she says it so quickly that you almost miss it. But the fact that she's saying that she had a dream is very important, because dreams are always very important in Twin Peaks, and they are often premonitions, or they often relay information about something that is important or something that's going to happen. And I think that the fact that Audrey is having a dream is very interesting. When the scene first starts, I think that when they are talking about someone who has disappeared, we think that she's talking about Richard. It feels a little bit crude, I think. It feels a little bit desperate, almost, that Audrey is so invested in her lover, that kind of lifestyle that she's having on the side apart from her husband, and it makes you really wonder about the kind of situation that she's got herself into with Charlie. I initially couldn't understand why she was asking Charlie for help, and then she says that she needs protection. What kind of protection could Audrey need? Is it protection from Richard? Is it protection because Audrey is actually the millionaire, the billionaire who has established the boxes in New York, and she knows that Evil Coop is after her? Is it because she needs protection because she has some kind of psychiatric problem caused by the bomb blast, maybe post-traumatic stress disorder? I know that a lot of people have theorized various things about this scene, including the idea that this is a scene from Invitation to Love, the idea that he is Audrey's psychiatrist, the idea that Audrey is still in a coma and that she's dreaming all of this, and I love those theories, but I don't think that we're going to be seeing that myself. I personally think that this is happening in real time. Audrey says to Charlie that, you know, he is spineless and he doesn't have balls, and she suggests that he has a persona that he shows to the outside world that she knows is fake, and she knows the real him. So that does suggest that he might be some kind of big shot in the world. Maybe he is the millionaire, the billionaire, and that's why she married him, because she might have had a plan to try and get Cooper back from the lodge. She may have met evil Coop when she was in the hospital recovering and realised that it wasn't the real Coop. Okay, so we see this scene of Diane drinking at the bar. The bar is closed. She comes across as someone who is very independent, doesn't trust anybody, doesn't rely on anybody else, and she comes to the realisation that the coordinates lead to Twin Peaks, and that's probably where everybody is headed. Okay, so now the closing scene at the Roadhouse. Not quite sure what to make of this scene with these two ladies. So one of the girls mentions that Angela, I think, that she says that she's dreaming about the guy that she loves, who is seemingly playing around with somebody else. It's difficult to know what relevance this scene has at this stage because it was the first time we've seen these people. So this actor Scott Coffey appears and he says that someone tried to run him off the road. Is it just another example of the violence and terror in Twin Peaks, or is something else going on? Has evil Coop decided to come to town and he's just driving like a madman? Whatever the case is, nothing sounds good. Everything sounds pretty fucked up, basically. The lives that these people are living, I don't know if they sound like fulfilled lives. They sound like empty lives, troubled lives. The Chromatics are on stage again. How many days have we actually spent in Twin Peaks since the start of the series? I don't know if we can really figure it out. And this track I feel is very languid. The calm before the storm, perhaps? Okay, so that's it for this episode. Next episode is called What Story Is That, Charlie? Which implies that it's going back to the Audrey Horne situation. I also thought that What Story Is That, Charlie could also indicate that he is actually an author of some sort. But certainly I think I'm grateful that we might be returning to the Audrey situation in the next episode rather than waiting an episode before we go back to that, because we had to wait so long for Audrey to appear and it was not what we expected. It's sort of subverted expectations, I think, about what we were going to get from Audrey. I don't think that this was Lynch trolling people, as a few people have said in the messages on my last video. I don't think he intentionally sets out to troll people. I think he just has his artistic vision, along with Mark Frost, to make things original, to make things their own. To be honest, I'm not sure I really gleaned anything more from rewatching that episode, and I still didn't find it as enjoyable as other episodes. But I think, as I said at the beginning, that as part of the 18-hour run and looked at as a whole, I think that this episode would make more sense and would fit together in a way that is acceptable to me and which enhances my enjoyment of viewing it. But anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for watching today, and you can subscribe to my channel if you like David Lynch or Twin Peaks. You can also leave a comment below to tell me what you think, and I'll be back next week with a reaction to part 13. Okay, bye.